This video is all about two types of materials, conductors and insulators. Now in physics, when we're talking about conductors and insulators in a chapter about electric forces and fields, we're talking about electrical conductors and electrical insulators, which are different than, let's say, thermal conductors or thermal insulators. Things like that styrofoam cup that you keep your hot coffee in, or maybe a water, which is a good thermal conductor. Here we're talking about electrical conductors and electrical insulators. An electrical conductor is a material that conducts electricity easily. Now, okay, what do we mean exactly by that? Well, what I mean by that is that it allows electrons to move freely without much difficulty in our substance. Some popular examples would be any type of metal. Copper, aluminum, silver is actually one of the best conductors. We often think of water as a good conductor, but actually water is only a good conductor because of the impurities that it has in it. Pure H2O is actually an insulator. Because water is a conductor, human bodies are actually a good conductor as well, since we're made of about 70 to 80% water. Okay, now what about insulators? Well, an insulator is quite the opposite of a conductor. In other words, it's a material that doesn't conduct electricity easily, so it's a material that doesn't allow electrons to move freely. In other words, it puts up a great resistance to those electrons moving. Think of it like if you're out running on pavement would be like a conductor, or if you're trying to run across a very full ball pit, like a Chuck E. Cheese. Running through all of those balls is really difficult. There's a lot of resistance to you running through them. Almost anything you can think of that isn't a metal is a good insulator. Some examples of insulators commonly used are plastic or rubber. Wood is a good insulator. Most synthetic materials really are good insulators. They don't allow electrons to move freely. So you may be wondering then why we care about these. And are these the only two categories? Well, we care about these because of the properties that they have as we are charging objects. You'll learn more about those properties as we learn more about this chapter. However, it's actually possible that there are some materials that are not conductors or insulators. There are some materials that have properties somewhere between conductors and insulators. They're kind of conductors or semiconductors. Semiconductors are very appropriately named. They somewhat conduct, but they're not very, very good conductors. They allow electrons to move, but with some resistance. One of the best examples of a semiconductor is silicon. That's the material that electrical circuit boards are made out of. They're made out of that so that for the most part electrons can't travel on those circuit boards except for in the paths that we allow them to travel in. But they can travel sometimes. Now, you may be asking yourself the question, what difference in the material determines if an object is an insulator or a conductor? Well, it really depends on the availability of free electrons. What the heck are free electrons? Well, if you think back to chemistry class, free electrons are those outer or valence electrons that are loosely bound to the nucleus. Almost all metals have those free electrons. It means that those electrons are able to be very easily shared among the particles in that substance. So they move around from one atom to another easily. Insulators don't have these free electrons. Their electrons are tightly bound to the nucleus, And so the electrons cannot move around, which means we cannot have electricity. Hopefully the difference between conductors and insulators makes some sense to you now.